it's Cass. Welcome back to my channel, What Cass Read. Today I'm going to bring you all of the books that I DNF'd in the year 2019. This week I'm bringing you 7 days, 7 videos, wrapping up 2019, and here we are with all of the DNFs. Some of these are books that I may come back to, but there are a good chunk of these that are probably forever DNFs. Will not be returning to these. Are these the worst books that I read in 2019? Some of them. For whatever reason, I just decided to DNF these books, so let's get to it. The first book that I did DNF for the year 2019 is Dream Fever, written by Karen Marie Moaning. This is book number 4 of the Fever series, and I decided to read it in February because I was trying to participate in February. February was a real rough start for me. It was books about Fae, and I thought I had a good TBR going, and it turns out I absolutely did not. I had been working on the Fever series at the recommendation of Sarah Jane from The Book Life, and I'm like really sad to disappoint her and DNF this entire series, but it was Dream Fever that made me want to DNF this entire series. So by the time I get to book number 4 of this series, I expect more to have happened and progression to have happened to the character than I actually got. And when I was reading it, there were so many people who were like, no, but you gotta keep going until book 5. And when book 5 happens, that's when like the story really begins. And I was like, book 5? Why do I have to make it like slog it through 3 books plus this 4th one that I'm kind of not feeling so good about, and then I had to read book 5? No, I was over it by that point. I didn't really like Michaela's, I guess, romantic encounters, and that is like a lot of the story. It's a adult romance, urban fantasy story, and I wasn't a fan of the 2 main male interests, and some of the sex scenes to me were non-consensual only because there was magic involved. And I just was like, I don't think I like this very much. The second book that I DNF'd in 2019, this is an Enchantment of Ravens written by Margaret Rogerson. This again was part of February, and like I said, February got me off to a rough start. It's this very whimsical fantasy setting where humans and fae do live alongside one another. And the humans are able to practice craft, which is like some type of art form. They're able to create things, so they can create clothing. Our main character, she creates portraits. And the fae are very envious of this kind of craft skill because they do not possess it. So they end up like choosing to be a patron of some of these people. That's like a really big deal if you get a patron. And this girl ends up getting involved with this fae character because she's trying to make some money for her family. Now, I really like Margaret Rogerson's writing. One of her other books, Sorcery of Thorns, which I read this year, I absolutely loved. I wanted more out of this book because I knew she had it in her based off of her writing. This is fairly short. It's barely 300 pages. And I was like, if she had just gotten a little bit more, if she had just decided to give us a little bit more length, I feel like some of the twists and turns that happened wouldn't have happened as suddenly to me as a reader, because I got about halfway through this book and then the book shifted heavily into some YA romance, and I was like, I didn't have enough time to build up to the level at which they're professing their love for one another, and I was like, I cannot. Will I come back to this one? This one's one of the maybe ones that I'll come back to just because I really like Margaret Rogerson's storytelling. She just has, I don't know, like there's just something like a little bit dark about her creations. Her fantasy worlds are very imaginative, and I really enjoyed them. So unfortunately, I did DNF this book. It is to no one's surprise that this book is in this video. This is Children of Blood and Bone, written by Tomi Adeyemi. This book was so hot and cold for me. I was gonna unhaul it ages ago, and then it got nominated for the BookTube SFF Awards, of which I was judging last year, and I had to keep this one around and try it out. I don't understand all the fuss, like what all the fuss was about this book, because here's my main gripe with it. There was, aside from the setting, there was nothing else that was unique about the story. There were so many different obstacles that our main young protagonists going off on their quest, right? There were so many obstacles that would be in their way, and then literally 2 pages later, it would be solved. I was like, oh my gosh, there's no real consequences for these characters. There's no like problem solving that we have to do. It's just like the problems and the solutions just magically appear 2 pages later. So I DNF'd it about 30% of the way through. I think I DNF'd it before a lot of other people found some complaints with this book, which was like the real heavy insta-love plot that I had heard so much about. But I DNF'd long before that happened. So I think, like I said, I only made it about 30% of the way through. This was another book that I was reading for the BookTube SFF Awards. This is Rosha and the End of Time, written by Roshni Chakshi. This was part of the middle grade category. It follows a young girl who lives in a museum because her mother is the curator. And because she lives in this museum, she works there. She knows a lot about the mythology and the artifacts, but she's also like just likes to spin tall tales. And her classmates end up calling her out on it. And they're like, all right, well, if you know so much about this, like, try this out. And she accidentally rubs a magical lamp and the creatures come to life. And then, you know, she's off on an adventure. I didn't think there was anything wrong about this plot or the story too much, right? But I was really bored and I had no desire to keep going. Like, I just didn't care about it continuing. There was just no push for me to finish this book. I also felt a little bit confused about Roshni in finding her middle grade voice. It was just one of those examples of like, a lot of these authors these days are like, I'm gonna write YA middle grade and adult, and not be able to keep their audience in mind as they're writing. And that's how I feel Roshni wrote this one. It just didn't feel as young to me as these characters were supposed to be. And this is, I swear, the last book that I had to read for the BookTube SFF Awards that I ended up DNFing. But I've already talked about this book in my most disappointing reads video, because I read Vicious, then I picked up Vengeful, thought I was gonna really, really love it, and did not. I said this before, I'll say it again. This felt like a superhero sequel that I never asked for, that I never wanted, but the studio pushed out to me anyway because the hype was so big. Vicious was so successful. I loved this origin story of 2 young protagonists who grew up together. I mean, it's like Superman and Lex Luthor all over again, right? I feel like I got what I wanted out of Vicious. And then this one came along. We don't totally follow Victor and Eli as much as I would have liked to. Before I DNF'd. Like I said, I don't know how the ending goes. But there were new characters in here that I also I didn't like. I didn't care. I didn't care about all these new powers. I wanted my old people back. The next DNF, I have also talked about this being a really disappointing read for me. This is A Big Ship at the Edge of the Universe, written by Alex White. I talk about the reasons why I was disappointed in this book in my most disappointing books video, just because I had expected a lot from it. I was really, really excited for it because I have some booktuber friends that loved this whole series. But as I was reading it, aside from the audiobook narrator, I'll again reiterate this point. Do not listen to this on audio. The audiobook narrator was awful. If I ever gave this book a second shot, it would definitely be in the printed form. Don't go anywhere near that audiobook narrator. So aside from the fact that I was listening to it on audio, as the story kind of progressed, I started picking up on maybe I'm not the person that likes science fiction and fantasy elements to mix. I might just have to like restart this. Another book, this was a book that I was working on audio, is You, written by Carolyn Kepnes. I started watching the Netflix show, and then I was like, oh, maybe I'll read the book at the same time, and that'd be kind of cool. Got it on Audible and started listening to it, and I definitely DNF'd the book because I was like, I think maybe I just prefer the screen format. I don't like being in this guy's head and having that be the only story that I'm consuming. See, like in the visual format in a TV show, you can follow Beck, you can follow her friends, and you get more of like her life in New York versus just hearing about it from Joe's inner monologue. And we get Joe's inner monologue and his voiceover in the TV show, but I don't know, just like constantly listening to Joe in the audiobook, I was like, oh, I don't like this at all. So I DNF'd that audiobook because I was like, well, I think I'm just going to continue on with the TV show. I don't need to read this at all. All right, and my final DNF of 2019, this is 12 Kings written by Bradley Baleo. This is definitely not a forever DNF. This was one of my books for my book club. I think this was like the November book club pick, and it just wasn't working for me at the time. It's a lot more dense than I wanted it to be. I like the setting. It's this desert fantasy setting, which I've been really enjoying. The city of Shirkai is this like jewel in the desert, this vast bustling city full of trade, and they have like really cool desert technology of like ships that can go across the sand so you can get to your destination a lot faster and all that kind of stuff. But in the place that I was at when I was reading this book, I just could not persevere. I just could not keep going. I was very, very slumpy when I was reading this book. So this is like, I own this, and this is it's me, it's not the book situation. I still have my bookmark in it from when I was reading it. I was on chapter 17 apparently, so. Anyways, this is 12 Kings written by Bradley Baleo. Whew, all right, that is a lot of talking. Let me know what you think of these DNFs. Did you DNF? Did you stretch and expand your DNFing muscle in 2019? I'm a fan of DNFing. If it's not working, it's not working, and it's time to move on. So that's my thoughts on it. Let me know what you thought about any of these books. Were you surprised about any of these picks? You can find me on my social media. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, at whatcassread, same as this channel. My Goodreads link, that one's listed down below. You know how these videos end. I'll talk to you later.